David Woods of the 247 Bruin Report in Los Angeles covers UCLA football and has for several years. Woods tells Jeff Palermo, Guilbeau and Todd Horne that the Bruins are in a dark place coming off of a 41-13 shellacking in the Rose Bowl against Indiana in its first ever Big Ten game. But that even though the offense under Eric Bienemy and the whole team under new head coach DeShaun Foster have not shown the ability to get out of their own way yet this season, he believes all hope is not lost as they venture into Tiger Stadium to take on number 16 LSU in the Bruins' first ever game in Louisiana. The Bruins do have talent, rated number 29 in the country talent-wise, and they could rally around how a good showing against the Tigers could have a huge impact on UCLA moving forward. He says it could happen, but Woods says it probably won't. Former head coach Chip Kelly, now the OC at Ohio State, drove a stake into the heart of the football program at UCLA, and now it's on life support, Woods says. But they will no doubt talk a lot about Edo's Sissy Blue comment from 2021 and hope to replicate that upset win this Saturday in Tiger Stadium. I'm your host, Jay McMains, and all that and more right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Munnerlin, and we're here to smash the capital city's trash.
Smash My Trash is a revolutionary compactor for large dumpsters, sometimes reducing the volume of waste by up to 70%. This means fewer hauls per month and big savings for your business. Fewer hauls and compacted waste will also result in a positive impact on our community and our environment by taking up less space in our local landfill sites. Schedule your company's free demo today. Call 225-497-0101.
Y'all ready? Yeah. Let's go. Come on.
Tiger Rag Radio is on the air.
Let's crank this thing up.
We're statewide, breaking down the latest happenings with LSU athletics.
This is us.
Hear from the coaches.
Put together a defense that puts us in a position to win the SEC.
The players.
Having fun and we working, baby. That's it, man.
The recruits.
Show some passion and some heart.
And those who cover the Fighting Tigers of LSU and the SEC.
All those things are going to be there, which are important.
It's 2 hours of nonstop LSU talk.
What a privilege. I mean, you get to represent LSU.
Tiger Rag Radio is brought to you by Cummins. Cummins creates power solutions that the world depends on. Helm Paint and Decorating. The paint experts of Louisiana. Louisiana Beef Industry Council. Max Home. And the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Get ready to talk Tigers with producer Jackson Blackman and our hosts Todd Horne and Jeff Palermo.
Three great players that are better people than they are players.
This is Tiger Rag Radio.
LSU will face another team out of the Big Ten this Saturday. That still sounds very weird, but UCLA will be in Tiger Stadium on Saturday afternoon. Jeff Palermo, along with the editor for Tiger Rag Magazine, Guilbeau, and Todd Horne, executive editor for Tiger Rag Magazine, to give you a scouting report on the UCLA Bruins. Dave Woods of 247 Sports Bruin Report joins us on Tiger Rag Radio. He joins us on the Max Home Hotline. Dave, how you doing tonight? Well, we had him, and now Jackson's on the phone. Let's see what's going on. Well, all right. So we're anyways, what we do know about UCLA is that, boy, they took one on the chin to Indiana on Saturday night. Okay, do we got him, Jackson? All right, we're good to go. All right, Dave. Well, we've already introduced you, so let's jump right into it. It's Jeff Palermo along with Guilbeau and Todd Horne, but rough Big Ten opener for UCLA as Indiana took it to the Bruins 42-13 at the Rose Bowl on Saturday. So far, what's been the reaction from the Bruin faithful on that one? That had to be really tough to watch.
Yeah, it hasn't been good, as you can imagine. I don't think there was a ton of patience in the fan base because a lot of people thought Chip Kelly should have been fired in November. And then when he wasn't, it seemed like UCLA was trying to save some money by keeping him around. And then he left. It was kind of a botched process with the hiring and all of that. There is not a lot of patience in Westwood. So already I think a lot of the fan base is pretty and it's not necessarily directed at DeShaun Foster, but just pretty cheesed off with the way this season has started and the way it appears to be going now.
Is there any hope emanating from the team? I mean, do they pretty much have their heads buried right now?
Gosh, it's such a hard thing to say. I mean, I think players are always optimists. I think especially at the beginning of the season. I think, people in sports are generally pretty optimistic when you talk to them. So I think that's still there. I don't think they've lost all hope. But at the same time, it doesn't take a genius to look at the schedule and see it getting a lot more difficult after the first two games. And so I think there's some reality at play too. And I think everything we've heard from DeShaun Foster right now is essentially this old trope of they need to execute better. And that's just kind of this catch-all term that doesn't really mean anything, because it basically means they need to play better. But how do you play better? That's practicing better. That's preparing better. That's all these different things that clearly there's been a lack of ideal preparation for these games. There's been a lack of ideal, knowledge of these schemes. I mean, the offensive scheme is entirely new under Eric Bienemy. And it's clear if you've watched any of UCLA play, the interceptions, the fumbles, that they just haven't repped some of this stuff enough.
Well, you do have Ethan Garbers, who's he's a senior, right? This is his fourth year.
Yeah.
And you do have Bienemy, who's got a strong reputation, of course, from the NFL and as an offensive coordinator. You think they may be looking at LSU's defense and salivating a little bit and thinking maybe they can take advantage of it a little bit?
I mean, there's that possibility, but I don't think this offense can salivate looking at any defense at this point. I mean, they struggled to score on Hawaii, and Hawaii's no world beater. They scored 16 points in that game. They're having a real trouble finishing drives. There's just been too many field goal attempts, let alone made field goals. But this offense, they need to get out of their own way. If you're watching UCLA right now, it just looks like so much work for them to generate 5 or 6 yards. It takes a whole bunch of fancy motion and, a bunch of fake trickery and all that kind of stuff just to get simple plays that other teams are getting with just a basic RPO. I think Bienemy's a West Coast guy. It comes from that West Coast tree, and that works really well in the NFL when guys have unlimited time to prepare and study playbooks. College game's different. And right now, one thing we heard in the offseason is these offensive players talking about how some of these play calls will be multiple sentences long. And it's a lot to communicate. And I think we're seeing that play out now. And obviously LSU hasn't had a great defensive showing so far this year. I think people were expecting it to be better, and it hasn't been. But I think it's still, comfortably better than probably Hawaii's defense, and UCLA's not really shown a ton of improvement since that game.
We're talking to Dave Woods from the Bruin Report, Sports 247, covers UCLA. Dave, were you at the game 3 years ago when UCLA beat LSU 38-27 in the Rose Bowl? Were you covering at that time?
Yes, I was covering the team at that time, and Ed O coming into the stadium and talking about the Sissy Blue didn't go over well with the UCLA faithful.
Well, how many players are left from that team, or any coaches?
Not too many. Coach-wise, I mean, DeShaun Foster was the running backs coach for that team, so I'm sure he's going to reference that moment, because that was a game where, LSU, I think, came into that one favored. UCLA wasn't expected to be great that year. And then when they won that game, UCLA, and obviously that turned out to not be a great LSU team, but when UCLA won that game, it put them on the national stage. And I'm sure that's part of what he's telling the team this week is, hey, if we even have a good showing, but especially if we win this game, that's going to change everything. It'll change the entire complexion of this season for us. And obviously that's a long shot, but I have to imagine that's part of the message this week.
How surprised were you when you found out, or after he was hired, that DeShaun Foster was going to be the head coach? He's not that experienced. He was a running back coach at a couple of places, and then boom, he's the head coach.
So we had heard about it, I think, about a day before it happened. We'd heard rumblings 2 days before that he was being strongly considered, and we were a little skeptical. And then the day before, it got very serious, and then it was announced. I was pretty surprised. I think even in February, because obviously you guys know the college coaching cycle. It's not there aren't too many options left in February. But even in February, there were coordinators who were interested. They took a run at P.J. Fleck from Minnesota, just couldn't get the numbers right. But there was another guy. I mean, Nebraska's defensive coordinator, Tony White, he is a former Bruin as well. And he was a finalist for the position, and they opted for DeShaun Foster, who doesn't have coordinator experience. And also, nobody else was hiring DeShaun for a head coaching position. No one else was interviewing him for one. So it was a curious move. I think it came down to dollars and cents a little bit for Martin Jarmond and the UCLA AD. And then also, and this is, something that I think people can have their own opinions on whether it should matter, but player opinions. The players were kind of unanimous in wanting DeShaun Foster as their new head coach. And that played a role. Whether it should or not, that played a role.
Sounds like Mike Archer at LSU back in the 80s.
It's time to start betting on yourself. Louisiana 988 can help if you're dealing with tough emotions caused by gambling habits. You can share as much or as little as you want, and it's completely confidential. It's free, available 24/7, and most people who reach out report feeling better right in the moment. Call or text 988 anytime.
Dave, what was the story with Chip Kelly? I mean, I know that he wasn't popular. They wanted, like you said earlier, they wanted to fire him as early as November or as late as November of last year, and they renewed it for money purposes. But why did he opt to leave like he did? Was he just so unhappy there, or what was the deal?
Gosh, how long do you have to talk about the Chip Kelly era? Because I could go for ages.
Well,
Chip,
we have till 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock Central Time, buddy. What time's your flight leave to Baton Rouge?
So here's what it was with Chip Kelly. And this is what he said soon after getting hired at Ohio State. And this is a true thing that he said. He stopped wanting to be a head coach. He stopped wanting to do the job of a head coach. But it stopped a long time before he's saying it stopped. He recruited UCLA. If people don't know historically, UCLA recruits like a top 25 program. Doesn't always perform that way, but historically recruits like that. And he had them recruiting in the top 40, top 50, and just did not embrace the natural advantages of being in LA. Taking an official visit and going to some of the hot spots in LA. Like, he wasn't doing that. He was trying to do official visits where they would come for one night and hang out at the training table. And that's just not taking advantage of your environment. On top of that, he didn't embrace NIL. He didn't do any of the booster relations that you needed to do. And so while they were putting up, an 8-4, a 9-3, and a 7-5 against three of the worst schedules in UCLA history, none of the infrastructure was getting done. None of the stuff that needs to happen to make the program viable in the immediate term and the long term. So he was not loved among the fans. A lot of people wanted him out starting at the end of 2021. Even when he was having that season where they beat LSU, people wanted him out. And then the administration, because of athletic department debt from essentially Chip Kelly tanking and losing a lot of games his first 3 years, season ticket sales went in the dumps. And on top of that, COVID hit, and on the West Coast, it was a lot different. Fans weren't allowed in the stadiums at all. And that whole combination left the athletic department in a ton of debt that they chose not to fire. And then come November of last year, they chose again not to fire, even though, to anyone who's followed college football, okay, that program's a little dead in the water. They're losing to an ASU team that doesn't have a quarterback at home, where they've got a tight end running quarterback. That's a thing that actually happened. ASU ran a running back and a tight end at quarterback and beat UCLA at home.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's Chip Kelly was getting out before the posse, I think, in a lot of ways. But UCLA flubbed this. They should have fired in November. They didn't. And so then he spent essentially 2 months interviewing for just about every open position he could find, whether it was an NFL offensive coordinator position. I even heard he talked to Kirk Ferentz at Iowa about their OC position. And then eventually Bill O'Brien left the Ohio State OC position for Boston College, and he found an opening with, his best friend in coaching, Ryan Day.
Wow. Well, Dave, what kind of shot do you give UCLA? Anything can happen on a Saturday, but what has to happen for the Bruins on Saturday to be in this game and have a shot in the fourth quarter?
It's a 24-point spread right now.
It's very slim. But I think the only way this gets done is if they start hot.
Yeah.
They can't have what's happened the last two games where they just shoot themselves in the foot for the entire first half and then get in a hole, because this offense isn't designed to score. I mean, so far it hasn't been designed to score, period, but it's not really designed to score rapidly. It's a West Coast offense, a lot of huddle up. They're not really equipped for it. They don't have a great pass rush on the defensive end, so creating negative plays is a little bit more difficult. So if they get in a situation where they're going 3 and out, even, not fumbling, none of the gong show interceptions, but if they're just going 3 and out over and over again in the first quarter, it's going to lead to a long day. So I think the only shot for them to make it a competitive game, and I do think it could be, because what's lost in all this is that UCLA is not an untalented team. They're 29th in the 247 Sports talent composite. They've got some guys at receiver who are pretty good. They've got a fifth-year quarterback who just hasn't played well this year. If they can make some plays early, if they can score, a touchdown on the first couple of drives, if they can just get on the scoreboard and not feel like the weight of the world is pressing down on their shoulders again in the first half, they could make a game of it. I'm not counting on it, but they could make a game of it.
So at the end of the day, do you think Indiana right now is better than LSU, or is LSU better than Indiana? Not that really matters because it's a different week. I'm just curious.
Great question. I think Indiana's more balanced. I think they're better, like the combination of offense and defense. I think they've got a more complete team based on what I've seen of both. I think LSU's offense is a cut above. I think still with that offensive line, I know it hasn't quite been the elite unit that people were expecting, but it's still pretty darn good. And I think Nussmeier's been really good this year. But Indiana, they've got a stout defensive front. So I would probably give the edge to Indiana, but I think it's close. And I think LSU's offense is going to be really interesting for UCLA's defense to try to stop.
Well, Dave, will this be your first trip to Tiger Stadium?
I'm actually, it's another one of our writers going, Tracy. So I won't be going, unfortunately. This is one of my bucket lists, but I'm going to have to check it off some other time.
What have you heard about Tiger Stadium that that puts it on your bucket list?
I'll tell you this: I'm glad it's not a night game. That's what I'll say about Tiger Stadium. This is, I think it's one of those environments in college football that everybody wants to go see, and it's probably, top 3 for me. I've heard great things about the fan base, great things about how rowdy it can get and how loud it can get. And I think if you're a college football fan, going to Tiger Stadium, especially for a night game, is something you got to do at least once.
Very good. Thanks a lot, sir, for giving us a call or talking with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Hopefully things turn around, get a little bit better for UCLA. But, it's that score was just shocking to see on Saturday. We appreciate your time tonight, Dave.
Yeah, anytime.
Have we got a September for you? Your East Baton Rouge Parish Library has 3 opportunities to meet author Jerry Pallotta, famous children's book author of Who Would Win? See art by Clementine Hunter and enjoy the sounds of the Baton Rouge Concert Band. These are just a few of the special things happening in September with your EBR library. Details are at ebrpl.com. That's ebrpl.com.
All right, that'll be it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Jeff, Todd, Glenn, and Dave for the discussion. We'll be back next week, but until then, stay tuned to TigerRag.com for all your latest LSU sports news.